Okay, welcome to 1.3 on fractions, decimals, and percents. This is page 1 for Math 1. And we're going to start this just with some warm-up problems. There's going to be some problems involving signed numbers and some problems involving orders of operations. So go ahead and work 1 through 6. Pause the video, work the problems, and then unpause. Once again, I always recommend work a problem, unpause to check the answer, and I would do one at a time just so you're getting that feedback. Okay, so hopefully you have the problem done, and I'm going to go ahead and start working through them. For this first problem here, this is just a signed numbers problem here. Is this an alliance or a war? And if you think it's a war, you're correct. Who wins the war? The negatives. There are more negatives than positives. And how many negatives will be left over? 7. Because 9 minus 2 is 7. So remember, in a war, you will always wind up subtracting these numbers. For number 2, is this a war or an alliance? And if you said alliance, I agree. It's an alliance of negatives because they're both considered negative numbers. A minus 4 is counted as a negative 4. So in this case, they are going to team up and form a bigger group. So how many negatives do we have there total? We have 7 negatives total. All right, next we're going to go to number 3. Is this a war or an alliance? It is a war, and negatives are going to win. There are more negatives than positives, and if we do the subtraction, we get negative 2. So just a reminder, and using those cards that we, the pink cards that have the signed numbers rules, the wars and alliances, it'll remind you on the card, if it's a war, you're going to subtract the numbers. And if it's an alliance, you should be adding the values together. All right, taking a look at this one, this is not a war or an alliance problem because this is not addition subtraction. This is a division problem. And multiplication and division have a different set of rules. If you have your pink card with you, you're going to flip it over and look at the multiplication rules, multiplication division rules. And for this one, we have negative 16 divided by negative 2. The first thing I would do is do the division. 16 divided by 2 is 8. And then the question, is it going to be positive 8 or negative 8? If you said positive 8, you are correct because there are 2 negatives. And when you multiply or divide, negatives cancel in pairs. Then we'll go to the next problem here. Now we're into our order of operations. So we should be using PEMDAS. And the yellow cards have the PEMDAS on it. And so whenever we do that, we want to go and work down this list. It's not just left to right. You need to start at the top and do each one of these. When you get to multiplication and division, then you can start looking left to right. In addition, subtraction, then you can start looking left to right. But we don't start left to right. We start parentheses. There is a parenthesis, but there's only a 3 in there. There's nothing to do in there. So we're done with that step. We go to exponents. There are no exponents. Now we look at multiplication or division. So now we're going to go left to right and to see if we have either of these. And we do. We have multiplication right here. This is 2 times 3 because the 2 is next to the parenthesis. So we'll do that first. 2 times 3 is 6. And then I bring everything else down. I haven't done anything with the 4 or with the minus sign. I just changed the 2 times 3 into 6. And now our last step here, we're doing addition subtraction. Is this a war or an alliance? It is a war. The negatives win, and when I subtract, I get 2. All right, and the last example. Parenthesis. Well, there is a parenthesis, but there's only one value in it, so there's nothing to do at that stage. Exponents. There is an exponent. This is a power of 2. So what does that mean? What do you do with this when you have negative 3 to the second power, or negative 3 squared? Well, a power tells you how many times you're multiplying this base. So this is saying that you have the negative 3 being multiplied 2 times. So this is negative 3 times negative 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And a negative times a negative, well, that's a pair of negatives, right? So the rule for multiplication is negatives cancel in pairs. Since there are 2 of them, they cancel. So positive 9 is the result. So we're going to replace negative 3 squared with 9. And we'll bring down the 5 and the plus. And now we just do 5 plus 9, which is 14. All right, so that completes the warm-up. For this lesson, we have a couple of objectives that we want to accomplish. We want to be able to convert numbers to either a fraction, a decimal, or percent. So a fractional value can be expressed in any way. When I say fractional, let me think of it. We talked about cookies. Cookies are always a good analogy because cookies are delicious. But in the problems we were doing earlier with the signed numbers and with their order of operations, we were pretty much always getting whole cookies, right? Like here we have 8 cookies, 14 cookies. Here we said if it's negative, those are cookies that you owe. So you can owe 2 cookies, you can owe 7 cookies, but we weren't breaking any cookies, right? There were always whole cookies. We either had them or we owed them or there were 0, but we never broke them into pieces. Well, in fractions, decimals, and percents, now we're talking about pieces. We're breaking the cookies into smaller pieces. And a part of a cookie can be expressed as a fraction, or as a decimal, or as a percent. So you can express that same value in any of those 3 methods. So the first thing we're going to do is just think about, well, where do we see these used in everyday life? So as you go through, I want you to think about where you see these. So where do you see fractions? And just list, where have you seen or used fractions in your everyday life? Where have you seen decimals? Where have you seen percents? So just go ahead and pause the video and just brainstorm some ideas there. And then unpause and I'll kind of reveal that things that students have shared in previous classes about these 3 things, where they've seen them used. We've had a time to kind of look at and brainstorm ideas there. So some things that we've seen fractions in, a lot of people brought up different types of measurements. And one type of measurement that people brought up is in cooking. So it's not uncommon to see like half a cup or 1/4 a teaspoon. So fractions are very often used in cooking. Another place is in construction. So if you're having to measure a piece of wood, you might have something that is, let's say 32 and let's say 5/8 inches. Right, so if we're cutting a piece of wood, that might be our measurement. And then another place we'll see this is with toolkits. Tools like wrenches. And to show you an example, I apologize, I hit the pause button. I think I cut off what I was saying. But in a toolkit, and here is an example of a wrench set. I'm sorry, there's a kind of a bright light there. In the wrench set, you can see down here at the bottom, these are all fractions. So you have a 1/4, a 5/16, a 3/8, 7/16. So wrenches are often measured in inches, or parts of an inch rather. You can also do them in millimeters too, but that's pretty common with tool sets as well. And then for decimals, a lot of people brought up money. So when we talk about money, so we can talk about our bank account. We can talk about shopping, right? So you can have something that is $10.59, right? So we would definitely use decimals when we're talking about money. And another one that we see is our odometer on our car. So your car might have, 10,358.2 miles on it. So it's not uncommon for you to have an odometer reading. So here's an example of an odometer where they have, oops, sorry, get that glare off of here. Let me see if I turn this off, if that helps. Oh, that's much better. So this odometer reading, we can see in the red that there is that represents decimal values. And then sometimes on an odometer you'll have the overall miles on it. but then you'll have like a trip mileage, right? So even though this car has like a ton of miles on it, there's 116.6 miles for the current trip. So you can keep resetting that trip to 0 to see how far you've traveled, like on a given gallon of gas. All right. Any metric measurements. So one of the strengths of the metric system, so we are talking about grams, meters, and liters. So this is weight, this is distance, and then this is volume. We don't use fractions with these. We almost always only use decimals with these units. Yeah, so those would be 3 examples of where you would see decimals. And then the last one was percents. So where do we see percents? Well, grocery store. So we'll see that a lot. We have 2% milk. And that has to do with the amount of fat that they leave in the milk. You have sales, like a 10% off sale, right? So they might talk about how much of a discount they give in percent, right? And also another area is with money, like loans. So they might have a 7.9% interest rate. Or you can also have like savings, like you can have a savings account, that gives you like say a 2.9% interest. So interest sucks when you're paying it, but it's great when you're collecting it. And so those are just some examples of where we're going to see percents. All right, that finishes up page 1 for lesson 1.3, fractions, decimals, and percents. So please continue on to page 2.